Hi guys, this is Arthurs, and this is my first time attempting and making a guide, and it will be on the Unending Coil Bahamut Ultimate. However, I'm not sure if I can call this a guide, since I'm mainly going to be covering the mechanics as a melee DPS perspective, so I'll be missing some stuffs out for the tanks and healers, but nonetheless, I hope that this will help people and attempting the fight. Now, let me warn you first, my video may not turn out to be the super friendly guide, you know, where I hold your hands on every single aspect of the fight, because this is Ultimate. I expect you to have some sort of raiding common sense. So, you know, I hope that this video will just mainly help you understand the fight, you know, rather than me explaining how to deal every single mechanics of the fight. Alright, so, you know, you are warned. Now let us begin. We'll be starting off with Twintania, and you will most likely be doing this part of the fight more than you ever imagine. You know, during progression, you will be resetting, you will be coming back all the way. So I'm not going to go into too much technical details in terms of, like, you know, how a twister works, how do you dodge a twister, what is fireball, what is a neuralink, what does it does. I mean, you're an ultimate raider, right? You got past savage, right? I assume that you have this, you know, understanding in you. I'm not gonna, you know, spoon feed or, you know, tell you everything you need to know, right? So I'm just gonna go into the main details that you need to know about this fight. Okay, so this Twintania fight is break into 3 parts, and whenever each part ends, she will drop a neuralink, which its position is pretty important throughout the fight, because where you drop them will affect how you do the later stages of this whole ultimate fight. Before I go into them, I just want to say that, of course, this is not the only way you place the neuralink. Some people like to place it the way I'm placing, some people like to do it the inverted triangle. This is all up to you, alright? Okay, so the fight itself begins with some auto attack. So your main tank can take this time to position her, which wherever you want her first neuralink to be placed, and then follow through after that, and then it will be followed by a plummet, and after the plummet you will get to do the first major mechanics, which is twister plus fireball. Now it is good to have a good spread out formation in advance, so that you don't run into your own or others twisters, and also making sure that you have room to run in for the share fireball. Now the timing on when you actually gather, I would say, you know, when you see the twister cast bar, when it's about 80-90%, you can actually start running to the gathering spot, which we usually do it behind Twintania. So after the twister plus fireball mechanics, you'll be using Death Sentence, which is a tank buster that also gives whoever takes it a debuff that will make you take more damage from Twintania after that. So obviously you want a tank swap, and the timing you do the tank swapping would be, you know, during Death Sentence cast bar. So that's pretty much the first part of the Twintania fight. So she will go through the cycle again until the first neuralink drops. After the first neuralink drops, the tanks will have to move her to second position fast, and she will stop and cast Liquid Hell ×5 on the furthest targets, which will then begin her first rotation. We usually let these furthest targets stay at the edge of the arena behind Twintania to bait the puddles. Now obviously do not step into the puddles or stay in the puddles for too long, because you will get a debuff and die, right? So when baiting, which will happen shortly, it's important to take note that if the baiter doesn't get far enough, Twintania will use this Liquid Hell ×5 on random targets. So to keep things simple, the baiter stays far outside while the other stays slightly in or near Twintania. After the 5 Liquid Hell, she will start using a mechanic called Generate, which will mark a random DPS. Now it's important to note that only DPS will be marked with this mechanic, and this mechanic will then create an orb under her which will chase the marked person. So for this mechanic, what the DPS needs to do is just go into a neuralink and let the orb hit you while you are in the neuralink with the debuff or buff, whatever you call it. Now don't be greedy, I know DPS like your uptime, right? But for this one, just go into the neuralink ASAP, take the orb, get out and redo DPS, right? Don't try to be funny, don't try to be too fanciful, right? Nobody gives a shit about your DPS, to be really honest. This is just the beginning of the fight, don't get carried away. Just play safe, right? Go in, take your orb, get out, alright? Simple. Now if you do not do that, basically the orb will hit you outside of the neuralink and you will just cause a red wipe. And also another thing to take note is whenever the orb explodes, it also have a small AoE, so make sure that no one is near the neuralink at all times when this mechanic happens. While this generate mechanic is finished casting, and when the orb is traveling to the marked person, it's important to take note that during this time there's also a new 5 sets of liquid hell that will happen, and you should know how it works by now, right? This is a baitable liquid hell, so the person who is responsible to bait liquid hells will always still stay outside and bait this while the DPS is handling the orbs at the neural link. We usually let a healer do the baiting for the liquid hell because the healer doesn't get the generate mechanic. A DPS will only get the generate mechanic. So if you were to use a DPS to do the liquid hell baiting, there's a chance that he will also get the generate, and that might not be straightforward from there, right? Because you might have to stand by, say, a second DPS to bait or someone else to bait. So we usually keep things simple. We just let the healer do the baiting, while any DPS will have a peace of mind to just deal with the generate mechanic. After the liquid hell sequence ends, she will use death sentence, and you know the drill, tank swap. After the tank swap, she will begin her second rotation for this part of the fight. Now, it is important to take note that this set of generate has to be handled differently, since this time Twister happens at the same time the orbs appear. So you should dodge the Twister, making sure that you do not place the Twister in the neural link while doing so, obviously, and then you go into the neural link to trigger the orb. After the end of Twister, she will use Plummet on the main tank, and you should push her into the next part unless your DPS sucks, say due to accidents, and you will get another set of liquid hell again. Same drill. After the second neural link drops, the tank will have to move her to the third and final position fast, as she will stop and cast liquid hell times 5 again on the furthest target, which then begins her first rotation for this last part of the fight. Again, to remind you, this generate only targets the DPS. However, the random liquid hell which happens during generate can hit anyone. This means that even the DPS dealing with generate can have them, which means that if you don't explode your orb ASAP, you are done, because most likely you're gonna panic, you're gonna drop the liquid hell puddles on the neural link, you're not gonna trigger the orbs before the debuffs comes in, and you will die, and then you will cause a red wipe basically. So obviously I suggest, right, don't be greedy on your DPS. If you have to drop the uptime, you have to drop your DPS and go into the neural link ASAP to trigger the orb, do it, alright? While the generate mechanics is happening, and while the random target liquid hell is happening, it's also important to take note that, you know, one random person will also get the fireball marker, and you know what you have to do for fireball? You stack. The timing together for the fireball would be when the 5th random liquid hell resolves. Now, different people does the liquid hell puddles differently. Now, it's very important for you to take note that you do not drop the puddle right behind Twintania, where people usually do the share fireball damage. So if in any case that you think that you are not gonna make it, it's fine for 7 people to share this fireball. However, the guy with the random targeted liquid hell puddles is also possible to get the fireball marker. So it's important for everyone to know how to count the number of puddles that is being dropped before you go in together for the share damage. You seriously do not want to drop the puddle right underneath everyone. After the fireball, she will then use death sentence, so tank swap immediately, because the Bahamut will come almost immediately after. Now, it's important to take note that most tanks usually do not have shirk at this part, so if you have a ninja, smoke screening the main tank and then Shadewalker the next main tank would actually be a good idea here. After the Bahamut, this will end her first rotation and begin her second rotation for this last part. Now, this is the same deal, except that because Twister comes when the orbs appear, you will want to do the baiting of the Twister first, as previously covered in the second part of the fight, before going to the neural link to trigger the orb. After the Twister resolves, she will then use a Bahamut, and right after the Bahamut, she will use the baitable liquid hell. So the beta, same drill, you should be ready for this at the exterior of the arena. And that's it for rotation 2. So after rotation 2, she will go back to rotation 1. You should usually kill her before or during the death sentence cast. Otherwise, you probably will be on the enraged timer already and you will wipe. And that's it for Twintania. Yay! Now, after Twintania flies away, you guys should gather for your buffs, etc. Most probably I would recommend stacking where Twintania was or under the neural link, so that you get knocked back by the Heavensfall, and then you start getting ready to go to where you should go. You should come up with your own designated position to go, right? Just make sure that no one is near the main tank, right? That was holding Twintania last, because that is where Nael will appear, and also she appears with the Bahamut dive, so you do not want to be near to the main tank. Otherwise, spread accordingly, dodge the ground AoE, which is kind of brain dead to dodge. If you can't, I can't help you there, I'm sorry. But yeah, this will begin the Nael phase. Oh, I almost forgot, when you're dodging the Heavensfall AoE, the ground AoE, there's also meteor streams happening on random targets, so this is why you need to spread accordingly. The Nael phase begins with Bahamut dive on the main tank, so you do not want to be near the main tank after you dodge the Heavensfall AoEs. And right after the Bahamut's dive, she will be using 5 Bahamut Claw, so it will be a lot of incoming damage, so heal accordingly. Right after the 5 Bahamut's Claw, she will start using Bahamut Favor, which is when the 5 dragon spawns. Now what does this 5 dragon do? I will explain it later in the video. A short while after the Bahamut's Favor, 2 random person will get a Thunder debuff, which is the Thunder AoE damage and also paralyze people. So you do not want to hit anyone else with this, right, obviously. So what we usually do is we usually form a triangle formation, like people will be in front or maybe in the middle, and then the 2 Thunders guy will spread left and right behind the boss. So you should form a nice triangle. Now you want to keep this triangle formation tight, but at the same time not hit anyone with it, because this will begin the first chat bubble mechanic, which is interesting, which is something that is not in turn 9, which is something new that most of us ever experienced in a raid fight. So basically what happens is Nael will say something in chat, and also you can look via the chat bubble or you can look in your chat. So depends on what she says, she will use the pair of mechanics accordingly. Now for the first set, regardless what she says, it will always be Dynamo into Chariot or Dynamo into Beam. So like I was mentioning earlier, you should form a nice triangle formation, everyone else in the middle or in front of the Nael, and then the other 2 Thunder guys form a nice triangle behind the Nael. So this will ensure you that you will never get hit by Dynamo. At the same time, do not clip anyone else with your Thunder. This should be the first basic movement. I don't think there's any other way for you to do the Thunder and the Dynamo for this first set of chat bubble. Now, after the Dynamo, it's gonna be either Chariot or it's gonna be Beam. If it is a Chariot, then obviously everybody needs to spread. Now, you do not want to spread too far out because you might need to gather together for the fireball, right? So making sure that you spread out nicely and then come back together. Now, where you gather is entirely up to you. In my video, what my static does is we just stack on in front of the boss. So it's up to you for this one. Now the reason for you to gather is because fireball will be marked on one random person and will resolve right after the chariot. So you want to gather so that everybody can get a fire for a nice start off, because from now on, the fireball timing, which fireball you take, is gonna affect your majority of your movement for individual for the rest of this fight. Of course, how you do the fireball is entirely up to you. Some people like to do the in-out method, some people like to do the out-in method. It's entirely up to you. Just remember, as an individual, you do not want to kill yourself with back-to-back fireball, or you do not want to not get a fireball when you already have an ice debuff. So it's entirely up to individual. However, if you get the Dynamo to Thermionic Beam chat bubble pattern, what you do is you maintain the same triangle formation for the Thunder and Dynamo, and after the Dynamo, basically the 2 Thunder guys goes back into the group, share the Thermionic Beam, and immediately after that you will see ground white AoE. Let us just call this the white AoE, alright? So after you take the beam, you need to dodge this beam obviously. Now you want to move together as a group after the beam because the fire have not resolved yet, right? You need to wait for the fire. Everybody wants to get the first fire, right? Otherwise, individually you will notice that you might have to take some fire that others doesn't need to. It might cause some visual confusion, but again, this is individual, and if you need fire because you missed this one, it's entirely up to you. I want to reiterate this so much because a lot of people think that you have to do the correct fire pattern. You don't really need, but it would be best if, you know, for the very first one you can do it together so that the next few it's easier to understand. Now, you want to take the fire after the Unending beam, but you do not want to get hit by this ground AoE. So it's this ground wide AoE. So what do? Usually we just make it uniform, common understanding that immediately after the Unending beam we will just run behind Nael. So every 8 of us will still take the first fireball. Now, since I finished explaining the first 2 chat bubble mechanic, let us go back. Now, after you finish these 2 chat bubble, you will notice that the ground AoE will appear. As the first white AoE appears, you will follow by another second one. For this first chat bubble mechanic, you will only see 2 of them, but at the same time, this means that also 2 persons will get a debuff, which is death, doom. We call it doom. So you want to cleanse this doom before the timer goes off. So for the first chat bubble, you will get 2 dooms, and it will be 5 seconds and 10 seconds respectively. Now, every time this white AoE resolve, it will leave behind a very small white marker, I would say, or you can, let's just call it a white small marker. Now, you want to take this small white marker to cleanse. However, you can't just take it randomly. Now, because the white beam appear one after another, these white markers comes out one after another, and because the debuff come in the form of, you know, 5 and 10 seconds for the first one at least, so you want to make sure that the 5-second guy cleanse first. Otherwise he would die, right, obviously, since you only got 5 seconds on his timer. But the 10-second can survive a little bit longer, right, obviously. I mean, simple math, right? So the 5-second guy will take the first white marker, the 10-second guy will take the second white marker. This will be the mechanic to handle, to cleanse the doom. Shortly after the second white AoE resolves, Nael will use Bahamut Claw ×5 on the main tank, so you will need mitigation and heals over here. At the same time, one random people will get tattered by the fireball. Now, because you already took the first fireball as a group, you do not want to hit everybody with this second fireball because you might kill someone. So the person with this second tatter should move away from the group. But however, if you did not get the first fireball, this is your chance to get the first one. While this fireball tatter is happening, shortly after, 2 people will get a thunder debuff, so obviously you do not want to hit anyone with this thunder. I think that's common sense, right? Now this will mark the end of the first rotation of the first chat bubble mechanic. Now if you are able to do this cleanly, your group, it means that your group have already understand every single part for these Nael mechanics, other than the dive bombs or cauterize, whatever you call it, that is coming after. So you have already done the thunder, which you know what to do. You know the fire, you know the ground white AoE, you know the death, you know the cleanse the death. That basically means that you are set to progress the Nael fight from now on. From here on, I wouldn't be explaining too much about the mechanics, but I will explain the rotation. So the second chat bubble is going to be either beam to chariot or beam to dynamo. After that, 3 persons will be debuffed by doom. The timer will be 5, 10 and 15 seconds remaining respectively, so you will need to cleanse accordingly in debuff timer. During this time, the ground AoE will appear one after another as well. And after all this, it will be Bahamut Claw ×5 and followed by the third chat bubble. The third chat bubble will always be dive into chariot or dive into dynamo. Now dive have a small frontal cone knockback, so you do not want to stand too close to one another. Spread out for dive, and after dive go back in ASAP for dynamo, or you can stay spread out for chariot. After all the cleanse, she will use Raven's Beak, so this is a tank swap. After the tank swap, we will begin the 4th chat bubble. Now this is the most important part of this fight, because the 4th chat bubble will have either dive to beam or meteor stream into dive. Now this is just very easy to handle, but the thing is, because dive bomb happens at the same time, so I need to spend a little bit of time to explain how the dive bomb mechanic works. Now obviously the best way to do the dive bomb is have one person mark the 3 safe spots for each individual dive, but this will require a lot of practice for the person marking it. Now I'll explain how the dive bomb works, how they dive, in which sequence, and also some of the possible situations that can happen. I hope that it helps you visually understand how you should mark. Again, this will require a lot of practice. Now from north, which you probably already marked, the dragon will always dive 2-1-2 clockwise. Now this means that the first 2 dragons from north clockwise will dive first as a pair, and then followed by a single dive, and then followed by another pair of dive. Now how you want to mark this, obviously you do not want the dragon to dive the party, and of course you do not want the dragon to dive the next person who is supposed to place the marker. So visually, if you look at this diagram, which with 5 random dragon spawn, this is how you should do it. Now of course there are situations where you will see all 5 dragons clustered together, or all on the left or all on the right. Now do not panic, because the rule still applies. Just remember clockwise 2-1-2. Now one thing I forgot to mention is that the 2 persons with the markers will have supernovas thrown at them. Now do not panic, because this supernova is not going to hinder you getting to your position and mark. It's there just in case you forgot that you've got a marker and you throw the supernova puddles in the middle of the arena, and most likely cause a wipe because there's almost no more room to maneuver. Now of course situations like this can happen as well, where the marker may be mismarked, but it's actually still safe, and just as long you make sure that the first and the second marker does not hit one another, that is totally fine. The first and the third marker can be together. The third person just have to remember that in this situation, always remember, wait for the first dive to resolve, then place your third marker. Now let's go back to the 4th chat bubble. There's only 2 patterns in this chat bubble. It's gonna be Dalamat dive into the main tank to Thermionic beam, or it's gonna be Meteor stream and Dalamat dive into the main tank. So if it is a Dalamat dive into main tank and then Thermionic beam pattern, this is really simple. Everyone but the main tank goes to the middle and share the Thermionic beam after you place the dive bomb markers. Now the main tank will then be separated, obviously, and take the Dalamat dive himself. If it is the Meteor stream to Dalamat dive into main tank pattern, you just stay in the middle, do whatever you are doing, let her throw her supernovas into the dive bomb markers people, and then wait for her to jump. So when she disappears, spread out a little bit, let the meteor stream resolve, and then go back to the middle, and then make sure that the main tank stay away from the group, and then she will dive, and that is the end of the 4th chat bubble sequence. Oh, let's not forget that Bahamut Claw stump 5 right there. Now once you've passed this phase, basically it's a home stretch, there's nothing more here. What she will be doing is only 2 more chat bubble, and what she does here is totally random from the first 3 chat bubble that you did in this fight. So basically it's just in, out, in. It's very simple from here. You should not mess this up. If you somehow manage to mess this up, dude, I don't know how to help you, man. You already done the most difficult part of the fight already. There's no way you will fail this, right? After the last chat bubble, she will basically use 1 more Raven's Beak. Now this is an indication that you are going to hit Enrage pretty soon. Make sure you tank swap, because she will be using Bahamut's Claw ×5 after that. Usually you should kill her during the Bahamut's Claw. If you don't, you're going to hit Enrage. She will then fly away if you didn't enrage her, and you need to check your LB gauge from here. If you have LB2, you will need to pop it right away, because LB2 lasts longer, but you have lesser mitigation, so you will need this to mitigate even the first fire AoE that Bahamut is going to unleash. If you have LB3, and because LB3 lasts shorter, you will only pop LB3 right after you get the first hit from the fire that Bahamut is doing, once you get knocked back. So basically, once you get knocked back, the tank press LB immediately. Now you want to pop your mitigation while all this is happening, so you know, put your Sacred Soil. Once you get knocked back, put your Passage of Arms, whatever, blah blah, heal up, and there you go, you are going into Bahamut's face now. Whee! This is gonna be easier to explain from now on. I'm very sorry I took so much time to explain Twintania and Nael, but I think it's necessary, because at later phase of the fight, when you meet Twintania and Nael again, I will not be explaining any Nael or Twintania mechanics. I'll basically just run through the timeline. So I'm happy that you guys survived this long ass guide up to this point, but hey, from here on, from the Bahamut Trio onwards, it should be really fun and short, alright? Now, the Bahamut Trio for me personally is probably the most relaxing part of this whole fight, because as a melee or as a DPS, all you really do is mechanics during the trio. The only time you're able to deal DPS to Bahamut is only in between each trio, where Bahamut is targetable and is compared to Nael, where you have to do DPS and mechanics at the same time. This phase of the fight is probably the most relaxing part for a melee or DPS. Now, I'm not sure whether you guys remember the Storm's Blood dungeon, the Bottom's Metal. I'm not sure if I pronounced that properly. You know, the second boss, where you do nothing but mechanics. The trio are basically like that. All you have to do is mechanics, and they are very systematic mechanics. If you cannot do them consistently, you either need to get good or... I'm not sure, man. There's no guide to teaching you how to get good. You just have to be good, alright? That being said, I'm speaking from the perspective as a melee or DPS. Now, for this phase, I think the healers are still gonna have a hard time, because in between those mechanics, even though there are no DPS to be done, there's still a lot of incoming damage, and healing and mitigation has to be on point. So guys, please show some respect to your healers. However, I say this again, if you are melee like tanks or DPS and you keep failing and hold your group back because you keep dying to just mechanics, then you just need to get good. Okay, that's enough for my temporary rant. Let's just begin with the Bahamut Trio phase. So after Nael, and when Bahamut is targetable, it will target the person who had hit on Nael. Make sure that the tank face away from the group, because Bahamut will use a Flare Breath followed by Flatten, which you need to mitigate and also to heal accordingly to make sure that the tank doesn't die. Shortly after Flatten, it will begin casting Quickmarch Trio. After Bahamut disappear, Twintania, Nael and Bahamut will appear at random position and get ready their dive bombs. While this huge AoE dive bomb is happening, Twintania will also use Twister. Therefore, you need to dodge your Twister at the same time not get hit by the dive bombs. What you need to do is predetermine a fixed position for everybody in respect to the trio position. And once in position, how you're going to dodge the dive and Twister is all up to individual. Now, you can watch the enemy list and look at the cast bar. As soon as the cast bar finish, that is where the dive is already happening and the Twister is already in motion. So once you see the cast bar finish, you can actually start moving. There are of course other ways to tell when you should dodge. Like for me personally, I would like to look at the trio, and as soon as they change their posture, I just move. After the dive bomb and Twister, 4 random person will get a huge Mega Flare AoE under their feet. Now a lot of mechanics is gonna happen when the ground AoE appears, so I will try my best to explain them all together. When the ground AoE appears, 2 healer and 2 random DPS will be hit by non-indicated Mega Flares. And at the same time, 3 DPS will be marked by the share Mega Flare markers. And shortly after, Earthshaker markers will appear on the DPS that did not get the Mega Flare markers, and also the 2 healers. And at the same time, 2 green tatters will be marked on random people, so the tanks will have to grab them. Now I know that sounds overwhelming, but once every individual role knows what they have to do, it's very simple. Now all mechanics somewhat resolves at the same time, so your final position will look somewhat like this. Obviously you can adjust accordingly, but that's up to your group. And that's the end of the Quickmarch Trio. Bahamut will then use Flare Breath and followed by a Flatten on the main tank, so position yourself accordingly and get ready for the next trio, the Blackfire Trio. When Bahamut disappears again, it will begin the Blackfire Trio. When the trio appears, they will appear in somewhat random position. What's gonna happen here is Bahamut will mark 1 random person to determine its dive direction. Nael will use Prepare Thermionic Beam on 1 random person, and Twintania will use Liquid Hell ×5 on a random person. There are a lot of ways to do these first 3 mechanics, but in this video we'll be doing the very basic method, the method that most JP, Parks and Static use because it's the most easiest to understand. So first, when Blackfire Trio begins, everybody just stack in the middle so that when Bahamut marks a random person, it doesn't matter who it is, Bahamut will always dive through the middle. At the same time, Twintania will use Liquid Hell ×5, but it is very important to not panic and move immediately. Make sure you get the Bahamut marker appear and then start moving. Now this is to make sure that Bahamut will always dive through the middle and not somewhat miss position and clip people while people are moving for the Liquid Hell. Now while Liquid Hell is happening, you want to move together obviously because Nael is preparing the Unending beam. So while you stack in the middle and bait the Bahamut dive, wait for the puddle to appear, you run towards Nael. So everybody will know exactly which direction to go to. So you move towards Nael together, baiting the puddle slowly. At the same time, everybody take the Unending beam together. It is important to note that you need to run slowly and bait the Liquid Hell slowly because you do not want to have a Liquid Hell puddle at the exterior because you will need it for the next part of this trio mechanic. Once the Unending beam goes off and you guys finish baiting the puddle, all of you should be right in front of Nael. At this time, 4 random people, namely 2 DPS, 1 tank and 1 healer, will be marked with the Share Mega Flare marker. These 4 people generally just need to stay in front of Nael to take the Share Mega Flare. Now as I mentioned earlier, you want to bait the Liquid Hell slowly so that there's no puddle in front of Nael, otherwise you wouldn't have a safe spot to take the Share Mega Flare obviously. When the Mega Flare markers appear, 4 towers will appear, 2 on the left side of Nael and 2 on the right side of Nael as shown in this diagram. Now since I mentioned earlier, 2 DPS, 1 tank and 1 healer will get the Share Mega Flare damage. That means that the other 2 DPS, 1 tank and 1 healer will not obviously. So these 4 people will be in charge of doing the towers. You do not want to get into the towers immediately because while the Mega Flare markers are out and while you guys are determining who is going to take the Mega Flare and who is going to do the towers, Nael will also throw at 4 random people supernovas, so you do not want to put a supernova into the tower, otherwise there's no way you can survive that bleed effect from supernova and also take the towers at the same time. Usually people enter the towers when you see the first supernova visually goes off. This will ensure that the timing will be precise. When the first supernova goes off, you enter the tower explodes, and then maybe the second, third or fourth supernova hits you, but it wouldn't matter anymore because you already triggered the tower. After everything, it will cast Giga Flare and that's it for the Blackfire Trio. Again, as usual, after the trio, the main tank position Bahamut properly because he will be using 3 Flare Breath on the main tank. Shortly after the 3 Flare Breaths, Bahamut will start casting Fellruin Trio, which will then begin the next trio mechanics. When the trio begins, Bahamut, Nael and Twintania will form a triangular formation. If you place the neural link like what we did at the beginning of the fight, you will notice that the trio will always be on top of the neural link. They can be random, but you can be assured that they will be on the neural link. With each of them on the neural link, this will make this phase a lot easier because there will be minimal movement. Basically in here, what Nael will do, she will do her chat bubble mechanic. And while the chat bubble mechanic is in motion, Twintania will use her ultimate move, which is the Etheric Profusion, which is a red-white AoE damage that will kill you if you are not in the neural link. And also at the same time, Bahamut will use Tempest, aka the 2 green tatters that's attached to random people which the tanks will need to grab. And this trio will end with Nael using Meteor Stream on random targets and a Giga Flare. The first thing you do in this trio is to run and gather around Nael and stand by for the chat bubble mechanics. It will always be Raven's Dive into Dynamo or Dynamo into Raven's Dive. For Raven's Dive you need to spread, for Dynamo you need to gather. I think you know this by now already. Regardless if it is spread into Dynamo or Dynamo into spread, you do not want to be spread too far out. Because right after this chat bubble mechanic, you will need to gather into the neural link to stand by for Twintania's Etheric Profusion. While the chat bubble mechanic is in motion, Bahamut will tether 2 random people with the green tether, aka the Tempest. Now, it is important that the 2 tanks grab these 2 lines while this chat bubble mechanic is happening. Obviously, the tanks cannot hit anyone else with this green tether, aka Tempest. Therefore, while everybody else is under Nael in the neural link to stand by for Twintania's Etheric Profusion, the tanks need to grab these 2 lines and go into the Neuralink, which is under Bahamut and Twintania respectively. So once after everybody is in their respective Neuralink to stand by for Twintania's Etheric Profusion, you need to look out for the Etheric Profusion's glaring effect. Once you see the glaring effect, you can basically move out of the Neuralink to stand by for Nael's Meteor Stream. Your spread out position after Etheric Profusion will look somewhat like this. While this Meteor Stream is in motion, Bahamut will cast Giga Flare. This will end the Fellruin Trio, but the main tank will have to position very carefully because Bahamut will use Flare Breath instantly after Giga Flare. Shortly after the Flare Breath, it will follow by a Flatten. After the Flatten, it will use a Flare Breath one more time before it goes into the Heavensfall Trio. Now once Bahamut becomes untargetable, the first thing the group needs to do is to gather in the middle of the arena. The trio will appear somewhat together and Twintania and Bahamut will mark two random people and determine the dive direction. This is why you need to gather in the middle, disregard who gets the marker. You make sure that you get the markers to appear before you go to your respective position to make sure that Twintania and Bahamut will always dive through the middle. Now these trio are appeared randomly, but it does not matter how they are arranged. As you can see here, no matter how they are arranged, as long as you put the markers in the middle of the arena and make sure Twintania and Bahamut dive through the middle, these four places are always safe. The four places that are safe are namely the front of Nael, the opposite of Nael, the left of Trio, and the right of Trio. Knowing that these four places are always safe, regardless of the trio arrangement, you can basically split the group up into 4 pairs of 2s and each pair go to each respective safe position. This makes the spreading out really brain dead to prepare for the upcoming Heavensfall. You just have to remember individually which spot you have to go. Same as Quickmarch Trio if you remember, the moment the pair dives, Twintania will also use Twister. As you get to your respective spots, the timing to dodge Twister is when either the cast bar ends for Bahamut's dive, or you can simply just do what I usually do, just look at the posture of the divers, and once they change their posture, you basically just move. So again, stack in the middle, wait for the markers to appear, go to your respective position, dodge the Twister, and as soon as you dodge the Twister, you will notice that the ground AoE and the pillars will appear. There are a total of 8 pillars, so obviously each person will have to go into one pillar. And since you are already nicely spread out during the dives, you can now predetermine who to do which pillar. For example, you can use Nael as a starting point and determine who to do the 4 pillars on the left or 4 pillars from the right of Nael. And as soon as the ground AoE disappears, you will get knocked back by the giant pillar that appears in the middle of the arena. It is obvious what you need to do here. First, identify which pillar you are supposed to enter before the ground AoE disappear, get knocked back by Heavensfall, and then nicely place yourself into the pillar. And obviously, for God's sake, do not stand in the middle and get killed by the Heavensfall, and also not to stand too far out and get knocked into the wall, obviously. Come on, you're Ultimate Raiders now, right? After you finish this sequence, and you haven't wiped yet, the Heavensfall AoE will then appear, and obviously this is, I don't have to explain this, just don't get hit by the AoE, right? While you are dodging the ground AoE, Nael will also throw some Supernova Puddles, so obviously you don't want these Supernova Puddles to be in the middle of the arena because you will need to stack under Bahamut after this ground AoE for the Twintania Fireball. If at any point somebody dies to this AoE or get bled to death by the Supernova Puddles, I would recommend that the people with the Fireball just stay out and die yourself rather than killing the entire or half the party with the Fireball. While you are stacking in the middle, Bahamut will cast Giga Flare and this will end the end of the Heavensfall Trio. Healing seems to be extremely tight here because you will need to top people off before the Fireball and after the Fireball so that people don't die to this Giga Flare. Same drill for the main tank. After Giga Flare, position nicely because Flare left arm 3 will follow. Shortly after the triple flare, Tenstrike Trio will begin. Before the Tenstrike Trio, I would recommend that you have marker number 1 ready marked somewhere north so people can determine spread out position a lot easier, and also this marker would help the Earthshaker at the later phase of the Tenstrike Trio. Once Bahamut disappears, everyone should stay spread out like this. What is going to happen here is that Twintania will descend and start casting Generation and place marker on 3 random people. These 3 random people will not be marked just once but twice. As one person can only take one generation orb at one time, the second orb that is coming will have to be intercepted by your party member. While these two generation mechanics happening at the same time, Nael will also use Meteor Stream on DPS, followed by healer, and lastly on tanks. Therefore, spreading out at the beginning makes it easier to see who's got the generation marker, who to enter which neural link, who can actually help to intercept the orbs, and also not get hit by one another's Meteor Stream. As you can probably imagine, this mechanic is not difficult to handle, it's just that because the 3 marked person are totally random among the whole 8 people in the party, sometimes positioning can be really tricky, so it's just all up to practice and very quick decision making. Now, as soon as the second set of orbs are handled, 4 random people will be marked with Earthshaker markers. It is important for the healers to top everybody off before these 4 Earthshaker goes off. You should know how Earthshaker works by now. No one person can take 2 Earthshaker at one time, otherwise it's an instant death on the second hit. After you handle the 2 generation orbs, it is important to remind people or subconsciously aware that number 1 marker area is actually the first safe spot. And also, since you are already spread out while you are handling the orbs and also handling the meteor streams, everybody should be nicely spread out, so the first 4 people with the Earthshaker marker should spread out accordingly like this. After the first set of Earthshaker resolves, the people who have just done the first set of Earthshaker should gather in front of Bahamut, while the second set of Earthshaker will be handled by the people at waypoint 1. You can of course do this the other way, where the first set of Earthshaker is handled at north and the second set at south. That is entirely up to you. As long as you predetermine enough space and position for people to go to and not clip one another with the Earthshaker, you should be fine. While the second set of Earthshaker is in motion, Bahamut will be casting Giga Flare. So as you finish the 2 sets of Earthshaker, gather, heal up, take the Giga Flare, and that will be the end of the Tenstrike Trio. Shortly after the Giga Flare, Bahamut will be using Flatten on the main tank, followed by 1 Flare Breath. This is the last time you can hit on Bahamut Prime, and you have to bring it to 59%. Bahamut Prime will then cast Grand Octet and disappear for the last time. Make sure you stack in the middle for this. The Grand Octet will begin with a series of dive, but thankfully there's a brain dead method way of doing this. Now you want to gather in the middle first to complete a sequence of checks, and then you can execute this dive bomb sequence really easy. This is of course not the only way to deal with the dive sequence, but this is the easiest way. Don't be stubborn, just follow this way. I am now going to explain how it is done and then followed by a play-by-play explanation. Now, as mentioned earlier, the first thing you want to do is gather in the middle, and you want to look at Bahamut's position in respective to number 1 that you have marked earlier, which is the north. If Bahamut is positioned at northeast, southeast, northwest, southwest, that means it is clockwise. If Bahamut is positioned at north, southeast, west, that means it's anti-clockwise. Once you have identified which direction you have to go, gather opposite of Bahamut after you see the first marker, which is the Nael yellow marker appears. Once you see and hear Nael dives, you can now move to the direction that you have predetermined. For this case, it's clockwise. Take note that you do not have to sprint, just have to keep running the direction you have to run until you get to the front of Bahamut. Once you get to the front of Bahamut, you can actually start popping sprint, and then the red marker, which is the Bahamut dive marker, will appear. Then you start gathering to the middle, everybody. Do not, I repeat, do not go into the middle before the red marker appear. If you were to go back, there's a chance that Nael is going to be opposite of Bahamut. So if you were to gather at step 3 opposite of Bahamut, obviously you can't because you don't want to get dived. So what you do is just adjust to the right, and then after that you just do the same, running the direction you have to run, popping sprint in front of Bahamut, and then gather in the middle after the red marker. Of course, now also take the chance to explain anti-clockwise. So once you identify it as a plus pattern, meaning anti-clockwise movement, you do the same. You gather opposite of Bahamut, you run anti-clockwise after Nael dives, you run in front of Bahamut, popping sprint, with a red marker gathered in the middle. And if Nael is opposite of Bahamut, gather on the left of Nael and then start the movement as usual. So here we go, step 1, gather in the middle, look for Bahamut. As you see, while I'm turning the camera, it's identified as a plus pattern, so that means it's anti-clockwise. Once you identify which direction, go opposite of Bahamut after the yellow marker appears. And once you see or hear Nael dives, you can begin your Mario Kart, for this case anti-clockwise. Just keep running. Once you're in front of Bahamut, pop Sprint, wait for the red marker to appear and then go to the middle. A quick reminder, since there are a total of 8 dives, this means that each and every one of you will get 1 marker each. It can be the Nael marker, which is yellow, it can be the Dragon's marker, which is green, it can be the Bahamut's marker, which is red, but lastly, it will be the Twintania marker. It is a personal responsibility to check whether you got a marker by the time the red marker comes out, because this will mean that if you do not have a marker by now, you will be getting the Twintania marker. If you already have a marker, including the red marker, by the time the red markers appear, that means that you are safe to just go into the middle and you are ready to do the next set of mechanics. If you do not have a marker by the time the red marker appears, that means that you have to bait the Twintania dive. And as soon as you bait the Twintania dive, you will have to do the next set of mechanics. While everybody gathers at the middle, 4 pillars will spawn. At the same time, 2 DPS, 1 healer and 1 tank will be marked by the marked Mega Flare. If you are not in charge of baiting the Twintania dive, it's very simple. If you do not have a marker, just choose a pillar to go in. And if you got marked by the share Mega Flare marker, just go to Twintania's right. If you are in charge of the Twintania dive, disregard of whether you get a marker for Mega Flare or not, you just go to the left of Twintania. If you have to do Mega Flare, basically just bait the Twintania dive on its left and then just go to the right together with the 3 other people who have the Mega Flare marker. And if you have to do the pillar, simply go to the pillar closest to Twintania. Now it is very important for the 3 other people doing the pillars to keep the pillar closest to Twintania open, so that these guys who have to bait the Twintania dive will have the easier time running to the closest tower and make it. And of course, not to forget, when Twintania dive, it will also be followed with a Twister. This means that after you take the share Mega Flare, you will have to move for Twister, or while you are handling the tower, you will have to dodge the Twister as well. Now, an easy way to tell when you should move for Twister is basically if you have the share Mega Flare, right as the Mega Flare hit, you basically move. And if you are in a pillar, basically when the pillar fades or start to disappear, you just simply move. I believe this is the easiest visual cue rather than just running in circles. And there you have it, that's the Grand Octet. The next phase is where you fight Twintania and Nael at the same time. We call it the Ads phase. However, you do not fight them at 100% HP obviously. By the time you can get to this phase, that means that you have done Twintania and Nael almost 1,000,000 times already. Therefore, you should already know Nael and Twintania mechanics, and therefore I will not be paying a lot of attention teaching you how to do each and every one of them again. Now, mechanics happen one by one, kind of very slowly systematic here, so please keep your composure and you will get them down very easily. Now, as soon as both of them are targetable, both of them should be targeted on your main tank. A lot of people that I know likes to do the one tank one mob tactics. Usually the tanks like to just position them at where they spawn, but be very careful because a Bahamut will come almost immediately after a few auto attacks. Bahamut Claw Stump 5 will also happen at the same time. Right after the Claws and Bahamut, 5 baitable Liquid Hell will happen. After the Liquid Hell, 3 generation marker will appear on 3 DPS. At the same time, Twister will happen. Whether you want to dodge the Twister first before enter Neuralink or enter Neuralink and then do the Twister is entirely up to you. Now, because one of the DPS will not get a marker, it is important that you guys set up a priority system. The easiest way is to let one of the ranged DPS to enter whichever Neuralink that is vacant. Right after Twister, Nael will use her chat bubble mechanic once again. There are a total of 4 patterns that she will choose from for the first chat bubble mechanic. It is good to note that if she uses one of the chariot combo first, then the next chat bubble mechanic which she will execute later will always start with Dynamo, and vice versa. As Nael is held at the exterior of the arena, it is good to note that healer and ranged DPS actually do not have to literally go below Nael together. You can actually stay far away, but stay further away. As for dive, you guys will have to set up a spread position, and also for Thermionic Beam, you guys will have to set a place together to share damage, obviously. I'll leave that to you. After the chat bubble mechanics, Twintania will cast Twister. After Twister, there's a 10-ish second window before Nael casts Mega Flare, so you can gather for mitigation and heals for this. Right after Mega Flare, Nael will use Raven's Beak and Twintania will use Death Sentence. Tank swap accordingly. Bahamut will come immediately after Death Sentence, so please position accordingly as well. During this tank swap window, the person in charge of baiting Liquid Hell should be in position as well. If you survived up to this point, you basically have seen all the mechanics in this ad's phase. Basically, they will just loop again, starting from Liquid Hell times 5. As mentioned earlier, if Nael starts her first chat bubble mechanic with Chariot, then the second cycle will always start off with Dynamo, and vice versa. For this cycle after the Twister, instead of Nael using Mega Flare, the two of them will actually use their Tank Buster, Raven's Beak and Death Sentence. And again, this forces a tank swap, and Nael will cast Mega Flare about 10 each second after the tank swap. At this point of time, both of them should be very low HP. Now, I forgot to mention that you have to kill both of them at the same time, otherwise you will just wipe. And this second Mega Flare will indicate that about 15 seconds later, you will hit Enrage. You have to kill them both at the same time before Enrage, or before the duty bar fills up to 100. And there you go, that's the end of the ad's phase, and you are ready for the clear. Oh, let's not forget, you can actually use this time to actually set your waymarks for extra flare. Enjoy what's coming next, take a deep breath, and get ready for the last phase. Remember before Grand Octet, I mentioned that you need to bring Bahamut's Prime to 59%. Otherwise, when you get into this phase, basically it will one-shot you. After Phoenix raises the whole party, you can start buffing, and it's important to note that Phoenix will grant you the buff Phoenix Blessing. Now, this buff will ensure that you will do a lot more damage in this last phase, and also it means that you cannot die, because once you die, a lot is at stake, you will probably not meet the DPS check. Just get good and don't die in this last phase. This last phase is probably the easiest phase in this entire fight. As soon as Golden Bahamut is targetable, it will begin casting Monafa. Monafa requires all 8 party members to share the damage. If you did not deplete Bahamut's Prime to 59% before Grand Octet, this will basically one-shot you regardless. Otherwise, this can be mitigated, but the buffs and debuffs used has to be very specific. Now, there's only 3 mechanics in this phase. I feel like I should explain them one by one now, because it will be a lot easier to understand as we go along the fight. Now, let's start with Monafa. Monafa requires the party to stack up to soak the crazy amount of damage. Golden Bahamut will only use 5 times in this phase that can be mitigated. How you plan to mitigate them is entirely up to your group and your group setup. For example, this is what my group uses. Again, I repeat, this is totally up to your group and your group setup. This is what it works for my group and gets the job done. After the first Monafa, Golden Bahamut will use Akumon. Now, I do not need to explain what Akumon does. Golden Bahamut will only use 4 Akumon in this whole fight, so basically this is what our tank does. Now, as we begin again, once Golden Bahamut is targetable, it will cast the first Monafa. At this beginning, melee LB3 can actually be used, but it's up to the group. After the first Monafa, the first Akumon will be cast on the main tank. Shortly after the first Akumon, Golden Bahamut will use Extra Flare. Now, this is the most important mechanics that you need to master in order to go for the clear, because this is the part where most people die. Therefore, I'm going to spend a little bit of time to explain Extra Flare and how to dodge it. Extra Flare in a nutshell feels the same as Deltascape Turn 4 Emptiness. Now, you remember that ground AoE puddle with the Narrow? Yeah, that's the one. However, unlike Emptiness, where the puddles can intersect one another, come diagonally, all Extra Flare puddles will only go in one direction. Extra Flare will appear in 3 lanes of 2s from 6 lanes. However, each lane will not get more than 1 Extra Flare. To show it in the diagram, it looks somewhat like this. Of course, which lane does each pair of puddles appear is totally random. This is just to simply show you that they come in 3 pairs of 2s, and also each lane will only have 1 puddle going through them. Now, enough of telling you how they appear and where they go, now I'm going to tell you how to actually dodge them. Regardless of where you want to start dodging them, there's only 2 ways of doing it. The first way is what I call a YOLO way, where you stand in front of the first puddle, wait for it to explode, and then go right through it. Now, this is an extremely risky way of doing it, because if you are late to going to the front of the puddle, you basically will still get hit while you are trying to run through it. The second method, which I prefer, is probably the safest way. So what you do, you identify a puddle, you go beside the puddle, so even if you are late, you will not get hit where it's advancing. At the same time, you can just safely enter from the side. Once you know these two methods of dodging, the next question is when do you want to dodge? Personally, for me as a melee DPS, I identify the first wave of puddle ASAP, I go to the side and I enter from the side. If you are a healer or range DPS and you want to minimize movement, you can actually just stay in the middle of the arena or wherever you want and then wait for the puddle that is beside you to go past you and then enter into its safe path. How and where and when you want to dodge it is entirely up to individual. However, the stakes are really high when you die because you lose the Phoenix Blessing and you pretty much is gonna hit enrage and die. So going so deep into the fight, my recommendation is always play safe. Go from the side, enter ASAP, get it done with, and focus on mechanics and rotation. After you identify and dodge the first set of Extra Flare, the tank can just leave it where it is at the edge and stand by for Archimon. This second set of Archimon is supposed to be only shared by the two tanks, so everybody needs to be really careful and not stand with the tanks. After the second Archimon, the party can decide whether to take the second Mon Alpha underneath where it is or just return to the middle. In this video, we just return to the center to prepare for the second set of Mon Alpha. It is important to note that while you are using Passage of Arm, make sure that you cover everybody. Come on, that's common sense, right? After the second Mon Alpha, get ready for the second Extra Flare. One thing good to take note is that when Extra Flare is cast at 60 to 65%, the first wave of puddles has already appeared. This will let your party identify the first wave ASAP and do your dodging accordingly. After this Extra Flare, the third Mon Alpha will be cast, so make sure you stay where you are at the exterior and stack underneath Bahamut. After the third Mon Alpha, the tanks will bring Bahamut back into the middle and prepare for the third Archimon. If you melee LB immediately at the beginning of this phase, you should be able to melee LB 3 again right here. After this third Archimon, get ready for the third Extra Flare. All the Extra Flares are handled the same, just calm down, get good, and don't die. Remember, stay calm, play safe. As long as you know how to do Extra Flare and stay alive every single time, your DPS will definitely come. After this Extra Flare, stack at the exterior and get ready for the fourth Mon Alpha. After this fourth Mon Alpha, tanks as usual gather in the middle and stand by for the fourth and last Archimon. Again, a gentle reminder to everyone else that is not tank, do not stay close to the tank. After this final Archimon, stand by for the very last Extra Flare. You are almost there. This is the last stretch. I want to repeat, do not die at any Extra Flare and you should be ready for the clear. After this final Extra Flare, stay at the exterior and stand by for the final Mon Alpha. After this fifth Mon Alpha, Golden Bahamut will cast another Mon Alpha. This Mon Alpha is the Enraged Mon Alpha and there's no way you can mitigate this. It will basically chain cast Mon Alpha until everyone is dead. What you want to do is spread out, drag out this Mon Alpha as much as possible for the kill. And there you have it, the entire walkthrough that I've done for this whole fight. Again, I want to say that this might not be an actual guide because I'm pretty sure I missed out a lot of stuffs. And this is the first time I'm actually making a walkthrough slash guide. So I'm pretty happy about this, and at the same time I'm really sorry if this video takes longer than what you expected. I understand that this fight is really long and I hope that my walkthrough will help. I would say this fight is very mechanical heavy, and all you need to do is to stay alive. Make sure you are consistent with the mechanics, and eventually you will get this done. DPS check is really not a problem in this fight at all. The DPS checks are really lenient. And again, I want to thank everybody for watching this video, and I hope that I will have another chance to make another guide in the future. Hopefully not this long again. Let me know in the comment section anything I can do to improve on my next guide or video. I will see you guys next time.